Disney failed at their science fiction attempt, always looking at Star Wars, saying, I wish we could be that good. Until the point where they said, you know what? If you can't beat them, buy them. G'day, Dogman here. Thanks for joining me for another episode of my cinema experience, where I'm reminiscing about the movies that I've seen in the cinema, the experience that I had, and how that has enriched my life with that. And it's my belief that cinema is the highest art form that we have as a society, because it encapsulates all the disciplines of art, from writing to photography to set decoration, acting, the music, the score, the sound, the lighting. Everything is put together by hundreds of people, putting at great cost a visual and sound spectacle to entertain, to inform, to influence the people who watch it. And we're going through this chronologically. So we're looking this episode at a movie that I would have seen in about 1980, which would have made me roughly 8 years old. So at this point in my life, I'd seen about half a dozen movies at the cinema, which included a Disney adventure film. I'd seen my first Australian-made production, which had one of the great Aboriginal actors of our time on screen, David Gulpilil, and another Disney movie, Pete's Dragon. Then I watched my first real big blockbuster, Superman the movie, and the movie that started my love for cinema, Star Wars. One of the greatest cinematic movies of all time. So there I am, 5 movies in, and I've seen Star Wars in the cinema. And I'd also seen The Muppet Movie. I've done an episode covering off each of those movies, if you want to go back into the playlist and have a look. Today is a recollection of a Disney double feature at the drive-ins. Now there's something that doesn't happen much these days. It's pretty rare to find a drive-in cinema. But back in 1980, they were a popular way to go watch a movie in the comfort and privacy of your own car. Now, the main feature was The Black Hole. I also saw at the cinema, at the drive-in, a re-release of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I watched them both on the same night. So we came in, watched 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then after that was A Black Hole. So obviously my parents took me. It would have been my mum and dad and 3 kids in the back. What I remember about this experience is that it was raining, and my dad didn't want to leave the windscreen wipers on because he said he didn't want to drain the battery. So we watched 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea through the haze, the blurry water over the windshield. Very occasionally he'd turn on, it would get too much, he couldn't see a thing, and he'd turn on the windscreen wipers. And I remember being so annoyed because at one stage early in the movie, they look at a newspaper and it has an article about a sea monster, and there's a drawing of the sea monster, but I couldn't see it because it was so blurry, and I really wanted to see it, and that annoyed me. Now, as a kid, I loved anything to do with the ocean. So I loved this movie, its underwater scenes. I dreamed of being able to do, diving underwater and those type of things. I had a great love for the ocean. So I really enjoyed the cinematography, underwater cinematography that was in this movie. It was good to see it on the big screen. Maybe slightly more realistic because it was actually blurry, like you're looking through a face mask that's all wet. So I have to ask myself, watching this movie, did it influence me to seek out those tropical islands? I remember snorkeling and diving in islands off Indonesia, down coral canyons and trying to find some crayfish that I could grab with my hands. In the back of my mind thinking, this is like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I also remember the scene with the big squid at the end. The giant squid grabs the submarine. It was raining during that as well, and it's a storm. So they say, like in Jaws, the less you saw of the actual monster, the more realistic it became because it was an unknown. You only needed glimpses of this giant shark. And maybe that's the same with this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. When I watched it on the rewatch, I did a rewatch in 2023. The effects don't really hold up compared to, our modern day CGI effects. It kind of does look like a fake squid most of the time. But if it was watched through a blurry, wet windscreen, that maybe makes it all the more thrilling and scary or whatever. So anyway, in the Jules Verne novel that this movie was based on, Nemo is an Indian from India, I believe. I haven't read the novel, but I've heard that. In this movie, it's James Mason who plays Nemo, who is not a Indian. He does look a little dark though. Maybe they did blackface him a little bit. Naughty, naughty Disney. We don't do those things these days. You should be ashamed of yourselves. And if we look on the IMDb rating, it's had 36,000 votes. 7.2 out of 10 is the average, which says that this is a reasonably good loved film by the general public. It stars Kirk Douglas. This is the first Kirk Douglas film I saw on the big screen. In fact, it may be the only one I saw on the big screen. Now, this won 2 Oscars in 1955 when it was first released. It won an Oscar for Best Effects, Special Effects, okay, and also won a Best Art Direction, Set Direction for a colour film. So there you go. And the blurb here says, a ship sent to investigate a wave of mysterious sinkings encounters the advanced submarine, the Nautilus, commanded by Captain Nemo. So we watched 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, but that wasn't meant to be the main event. The main event was meant to be the black hole. Now, when you watch the trailer for the black hole, you think, wow, this looks amazing. This is going to be like Star Wars. Perhaps that's what Disney was trying to do, was ride on the coattails of the success of Star Wars, and they thought, we've got to get a good science fiction movie. Not a kids movie, but a movie that we can tap into that market. So everyone who loves Star Wars will come and watch this film. I'm guessing that's what the studio executives were thinking when they made this. I'd have to say, this was a letdown, this movie. This movie was such a letdown. It's such a poor attempt at a Star Wars sci-fi style movie. And even as a kid, I just smelt the phony, try-hard attempt. It didn't even come close. In space terms, it was light years away from Star Wars standard. So it's kind of like a space disaster movie. At the end of the movie, I remember as a kid just being so depressed as I watched this ship just destruct and be destroyed and people dying and just being depressed, like, why am I watching this? And then I did a rewatch. I forced myself to do a rewatch in 2023. And then you realize how bad this movie really is. It was hard to watch. And I forgot how weird it got at the end. Like, it gets so weird that this crazy captain ends up in a place like hell. Like, it's just bizarre. Like, you think, why did they go this way with this film? I reckon even as a kid, 8-year-old kid, I could have written a better screenplay than them, like a better plot line for this movie. And interesting, I didn't even realise, even doing the rewatch, one of the actors is Anthony Perkins, who I later saw on the big screen at a rewatch of Psycho. But I didn't even realise doing the rewatch that was him. I just saw it in the credits that Anthony Perkins was in the movie. And if we go to the Internet Movie Database ratings, 27,000 people have voted and it's averaged 5.9 out of 10, which in my opinion is overrated. Doesn't even deserve that. You know, something interesting in when you watch all these old sci-fi movies, the computer systems is really weird because it's just big boards on the wall of flashing lights that have no purpose or no meaning. Like even in Star Wars they do it. Like, what's the point of all these flashing lights? But when you're watching a movie for the first time, you tend not to, you accept that, yes, computers, you don't take much detail. Like Star Wars, you're caught up in the story, but when you watch it a few times on a rewatch, you go, hang on, that just looks like buttons. Like, how do they even know? Then you got all these buttons with no symbols on them. How do they know what they're for? They're just lights and flashing lights. Anyway, back to the black hole. The blurb here says, a research vessel finds a missing ship commanded by a mysterious scientist on the edge of a black hole. Now, somehow the black hole got nominated for a couple of Oscars. didn't win. Best Cinematography in 1980 and Best Visual Effects. So the winner for that year was actually Best Cinematography was Apocalypse Now, much more deserving. And Alien tipped them for Best Visual Effects, and I think that's fair as well. Bit of trivia is that Sigourney Weaver apparently was on the short list for a while for starring in The Black Hole. Fortunately for her career, she didn't get the gig because they didn't like her name. Imagine that. Hollywood executives not giving you a part in a movie because they didn't like your name. Like, that's just bizarre, isn't it? That's how the industry worked. That's how fickle it was. Whether you got a job or not was based on your name. You've got no control over your name. I guess that's why people fake their names. Like, I don't think Tom Cruise, that's not his actual name. That sounds movie star like. So that's gives you an idea of how fake the industry is. These people are acting. They're so used to acting that they're willing just to act and change their name to act the part of the movie star. So I guess we could say that Disney failed at their science fiction attempt, always looking at Star Wars, saying, I wish we could be that good. Until the point where they said, you know what? If you can't beat them, buy them. And they bought over Star Wars. They now own every part of Star Wars. And people would argue that the Disney Star Wars can never match the genius of George Lucas's Star Wars. Overall, I find them more fun. Do yourself a favor and stay away from the black hole. That's a good tip for today. Anyway, that's me signing out. Love you all, and keep watching, keep liking, keep subscribing, and please continue to join me on this journey of exploring my cinematic experience.